Hello and welcome to Photography with Imre. I got a great question from a viewer in regard to how you can protect your images online, whether you are using a photo sharing site or creating your own website to display your pics. So in this episode, I'll be focusing on some protective steps you can take, as well as a few measures you can employ if someone is using your photos without your permission. First off, I want to point out that I am not a lawyer or legal expert, so to be properly informed, you should consult with a qualified intellectual property lawyer or legal expert in your area. Speaking of area, copyright laws often differ depending on where you live, so that's something to keep in mind as well. Alright, let's begin. Pretty much anywhere in the world you are, the moment you take a picture, it becomes your intellectual property. Thus, you own the copyright to it. Like most photographers, you'd probably like to show off your work, sometimes just for fun because you love photography as a hobby, and other times you might like to sell your shots to supplement your living. Obviously, not many people like to have their work stolen or used elsewhere without their permission, so here are a few things you can do to protect your photos. Firstly, this might sound unusual, but if you absolutely want to be sure that no one takes your images, then simply don't put them online. Unfortunately, this is not exactly a good way to get your works of art noticed, so moving on. Secondly, you could place a digital watermark on your photos, and there are a few different types. Some are highly visible, like this example, while others are more obscure and thus more difficult to remove. There are also hidden ones that require special processing in order to make them visible. Those types are often used as tracers back to the source. Some photographers don't like to use watermarks because they feel it takes away from the aesthetic appeal of the photo, while others like it and feel it acts both as an extra layer of copyright protection and even as promotion. Whether you use one or not, and which type, is a personal decision you need to make, and either way, you still own the copyright. Thirdly, most file formats allow copyright information to be embedded. This info is generally part of the metadata in the file, which often has other things like make and model of the camera and what settings were used to shoot the photo, amongst other details. A few digital SLR camera models allow you to enter your copyright info into them, but in most cases photographers enter this info through various image editors. Next up, and fourth on my list, if you are going to be placing your photos online, I strongly recommend resizing them to under 1 megapixel in size. In pixel value, that means keeping the width or height of the image, whichever is greater, to no more than about 1,000 pixels. Images this size are detailed enough to enjoy on a monitor, but are poor quality if printed and enlarged. In addition, I would suggest that the original files, whether RAW or high-quality JPEG, are not kept online, but instead offline, such as your computer or a backup drive. Now, there are probably some exceptions, like if you're working with a stock photo company, but if you're uploading your photos to a sharing site or on your own website, there aren't many good reasons to have the originals sitting there. The idea behind these tactics is not only to prevent someone from using your photos without your permission, but also to aid you in providing proof that the photos belong to you. This is especially useful if an issue escalates into the courtroom. Along those lines, you might find it beneficial to register your photos with your government's copyright office, which would give you some credible written proof that the material belongs to you. Now I'll quickly discuss a few things about having your images displayed using a photo sharing website. For one, try to pick a reputable one that is well known, otherwise you might find yourself ripped off by a scam site. In addition, locate the account settings or preferences of the website, as many offer options for setting copyright notices and whether people can download your images or not. And if you've decided to build your own website, I will include some tips on my supplemental blog post, so feel free to check it out. Unfortunately, it's important to note that there are ways to circumvent some of these protective measures, but nonetheless, in my opinion, there is value in using them. Essentially, think of these as layers of defense to help prevent your photo from being used without your permission. The more layers you build up, the more challenging it becomes to get by them. Now let's briefly discuss what you can do if you discover that someone is using your photos without your permission. This is not an exhaustive list, but rather a few places to start. First of all, nothing is actually an option, and there are a few reasons for this. For example, perhaps the manner in which the photo is being used is relatively harmless and doesn't bother you much. Or perhaps it's simply not feasible to do anything about the issue due to time and money concerns. Second, you could contact a person or organization using your work illegally and politely ask them to discontinue doing so. From my knowledge, this method is often enough to stop most issues. Sometimes a message can enlighten someone that they made an honest mistake, while in other cases, the offending party generally cooperates due to a fear of legal consequences. Third, if the person or organization doesn't respond, then you might be able to get some help from the law depending on the circumstances. To be more specific, perhaps you find someone using your work without permission on some photo sharing website and they haven't responded to your requests. In such a case, you could utilize the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, or DMCA, and file a takedown notice. This would require the photo sharing website to remove your material from their site and, as a result, off the offending user's account. Now, this law is applicable in the United States, but if the issue happens in another country, then you'll have to do some research to see what alternatives exist. For the fourth point here, I'm going to lump in the complicated issues. An example would be that you find a company profiting off your work without your permission. In cases like this, it's best to consult with a lawyer, as matters could end up in court. And that brings this episode to a close. As usual, I'll write up a supplemental blog post with links to other sites detailing various topics mentioned here, along with other copyright considerations. Facebook and Twitter links can be found on the blog or description of this video, and please do subscribe. Thanks for watching. See you next time.